Welcome to the I Love Recruiting podcast with your host, Adam Roach.
Welcome back, everybody, to the I Love Recruiting podcast. I am your host, and today I have two friends of mine that go way, way back, business partners. We've shared many things together, and actually, the guy that I'm getting ready to introduce right now, his name is Josh Light. Josh Light is my partner in I Love Recruiting, all things I Love Recruiting, whether that's a podcast, whether that's our software, whether that is anything you see on the iloverecruiting.com website. That is my man, Josh. Josh, welcome to the show.
Hello. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you. Hey, Josh, we have somebody fun on the show today. This is someone that we've gone back, let's see, probably about 20 years. We go back with this guy, don't we?
Way back. Way back. Yes.
Way back. So everybody, I want to introduce you to someone that is near and dear to my heart. I know near and dear in Josh's heart. This guy has accomplished a ton in his life, from a writer to a tennis pro to a producer, director in the commercial real estate space, investor. Rohit Nahata, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Adam.
So Ro, tell us. So by the way, we call Rohit Ro. I want to share quickly the story of how Ro and I met. So Rohit was living with Josh's. Let's see. Let me rephrase that. Josh's brother was living with Rohit's sister in San Francisco, actually Sausalito, right? And I just happened to be going up to NorCal. Josh and I were living in SoCal, and I stopped by to see Dave, which is Josh's brother, and Rohit happened to be there. Ro, you remember that?
I do.
Let's see what your recollection of the story was. What do you remember?
Well, I was on my drive from my hometown, Louisville, and I was on my way to Los Angeles. And I was driving cross country, and my first pit stop was Sausalito because my cousin was graduating from Stanford, and my parents were there, so we were all decided to meet up there for his graduation. And after that, I was going to drive down to LA and live permanently.
And here's how the story continues. Ro, I remember your mom was making samosas in the kitchen. Is that what they were called?
Yeah.
Oh, and they were handmade, and they were the best tasting. I'd never had a samosa in my life. The best tasting food I'd ever had. And you and I got talking. You said you were writing, and you also said you were a tennis player. And I, at the time, was running a tennis club, and Josh and I were living together in Southern California, and we actually had a pseudo guest house in the backyard. Josh, you remember that? It was a garage converted into a room with a bathroom. So, Ro, do you remember that? I think you used a line saying, "Hey, listen, I'm going to be moving down to LA." I think you were pretty much fishing to see if we would let you live with us. Do you remember that?
Maybe. I do recall, of course, I needed a place to live, and I do recall you mentioning the guest house. I don't think it was a done deal right then and there, but I know I didn't look at any other places. I was hoping that it would be a done deal because you guys, seemed well, I hadn't met Josh yet, but you seemed like a great guy, and Dave was obviously a super good guy too. So I would thought that it would be nice to live with, some guys from Indianapolis, me being from Louisville, similar part of the country. I thought it would be also, a huge win to find a place to live so soon. Of course, being it was on my number one at the top of my to-do list. So I was trying to get it done.
Yes, you.
And it worked out.
Josh, what's your first memory of Ro when he came down to LA? And I think I had told you, hey, listen, I think I found someone to rent out the back guest house.
I have so many memories, but once I originally met Ro, I said, Adam, you're right. It would be a perfect fit. No, he seems like the perfect guy to live in the garage.
Uh-huh. Now, Ro, on the I Love Recruiting podcast, we have an equation: recruiting equals influence equals leadership. So we're going to go with the first two here, because we then recruited you based on the need that you had to live in the actually, it's probably like 200 square feet room with a bathroom in the back of the house. And you did it, didn't you?
I did. I needed a place to live, obviously. Based on that description, everyone should be able to tell that I'm not very high maintenance or very fancy. At least I wasn't back then. But it was perfect. It was, the one good thing about it that I really liked is I had my own bathroom.
You did.
And even though it was maybe 40 square feet, it was, it belonged to me. That was one thing that I was very, very happy about. It was next to, this place was adjacent to the garage where one of us on this phone call kept their motorcycle. And I loved when that person would start his motorcycle at like 6 in the morning on weekends or random weekday mornings, because it was just so beautiful to wake up.
So now, hold on. I'm going to pause this story real quick because I want to give our listeners some context here. So basically what you're listening to, this is early 2000s, Southern California. Josh and I had known each other for probably, since junior high, and we had just met Rohit. And Josh had been living in SoCal at the time. What, Josh, about 3 years?
Probably less than that. Probably around 2 years.
Around 2 years, yeah. And I had moved there in 2000, and so this might have been around 2002-ish. And Josh is in the IT space, so this is the .com had just exploded, meaning the wrong way. It had just burst. It was just bursting. Josh, was it just bursting or did it burst?
It had just burst. It was, it was in the ashes. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm. And I was a tennis pro. And actually, was I a tennis pro yet? Yeah, I was a tennis pro, but I think I might have still been a shop clerk. I wasn't general manager yet. And Rohit, you said you played tennis, didn't you?
I did. I had played tennis, and not only did you give me a great assist in my living situation, you then was able to get me a job as you did. I started out in the shop and then made my way onto the court.
Yeah. So yeah, you like I did. You started as a clerk answering the telephones at Beverly Hills Tennis, and stringing rackets. Yep. Did you know how to string a racket before?
No, I did not.
Neither did I, really. So again, listeners, what we're sharing with you is we have now had massive successes in our lives, and this was 20 years ago. So we're kind of giving you a quick little rewind on where we were in 2000-ish, how we all came together, and now how we have all had some massive successes in our lives. So, Ro, let's go back. So Josh is starting his motorcycle. He's still programming. You and I would go into Beverly Hills Tennis. We were teaching tennis to the stars, kind of. And what else do you remember from those days?
Well, it was definitely looking back at it now, we're all, slightly over 40. Mm-hmm. So back then, 2001, this is, life is much simpler. Of course, you're a little bit more carefree. Mm-hmm. Living in your 20s in Los Angeles, it's sort of, and doing it with good friends is something that, when you look back on it, was amazing because we had a lot of fun times. In addition to all of this, I had wanted to move to Los Angeles because I had written a screenplay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it was a dream of mine to get this screenplay turned into a movie. Yeah.
Now walk us down that path, because you worked. I remember you back in your guest house. We're going to keep calling it the guest house, by the way. You were working back in your guest house, and you kept writing. You worked on that screenplay a ton. meaning you wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. Josh, you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And we had to read it over and over and over. Well, the cool part, Ro, was we learned how to read script. We learned how to read screenplays.
Yeah, which is kind of important. Kind of helps in that town if you're able to do that. Screenplays are relatively easy to read, much easier than a novel because it's more dialogue centric. I remember one thing that you told me, which I remember to this day, is that once you read it, you gave me a sincere compliment, and you were kind of overwhelmed or impressed by the fact that everything that you had held in your hand, that 120-page script, all came out of my head.
True story. Now, what I learned from you during that process was that, and I didn't know this, I'd never read a screenplay before, that each page represented a minute. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
And
true.
so that's why it was the length. Well, that's why it was 120 pages, because it had to be 120 minutes, right?
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, so now keep going. Fast forward. So the script finally came to fruition, and I remember we used to pitch it to some of the clients that would come into the club, right?
Yes, we did. We did. We had different writers and producers read it, and the reaction to the script was, it just kind of, some people love it, some people aren't into it. It's just a mixed bag because other people have different projects going on as well. So what I ended up doing is I ended up going to film school and at Cal State LA. And then once I finished film school, the idea of making a movie didn't seem that intimidating anymore. And I came to realize that no one is going to be more passionate about getting this made than I am. So I had to then, instead of asking around and depend on the help of others, take the reins and lead the charge myself to getting it made.
So walk us down that path now. So we'd given it to a few people. They didn't bite. You then realized, I remember you going to film school. I forgot about that until you just said that.
Yeah.
What did you do? Well, I mean, how did you, what happened next? Cause you produced it, you directed it, you wrote it, and then you made it. Right.
So, it was obviously an independent movie. After film school, I knew I needed to get basically, well, it starts with funding. You need some money. And I was able to source funding. And once I had that in place, it was pretty much, all right, let's get it going, assemble a team, which I did. And then you kind of handle one task after another. Here's a question for you. Do you remember us doing auditions at the tennis club?
Do I remember? I remember it like it was yesterday. Josh,
Yeah,
was Josh there? Did Josh get to witness any of that?
I think he may have.
Yeah,
I think so. I think he did.
I did. I remember some of the casting.
Yes, because Josh's wife.
So, when you say assemble a team, where does it?
Because Josh, because because at the time I believe Josh and I were living together, and all the headshots that would come in for the casting for auditions, Josh, his wife, and I, we'd kind of go through and we'd kind of discuss them all and narrow down the pool, and then we had them come in to the tennis club.
Now, if I remember correctly, we did it down where they used to play bridge. And now my memory serves me that there was a line out the door for people coming in to audition. Or is that just my imagination? Did I remember that correctly?
Well, I think at first, there probably was. But, when we started doing the callbacks, those are more selective. And so that was when that's when you reduce the pool from, let's say, the line out the door to maybe 10 people. and then from 10 you go to 5, 3, 2, 1, and then
Mm-hmm.
you make someone an offer. And luckily we got everyone that we wanted, and we really put together a good cast of talent.
Mm-hmm. And again, and sticking with our equation here, now you're recruiting people to be in your movie. Now, it isn't hard to do that inside of the City of Angels. However, you had to influence certain people to not only read the script but want to be a part of that script. And we had some friends that ultimately you wound up hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it. Basically, when you're sort of in the independent movie scene, it's all about, a lot of it is about the content. So when you share the script to anyone that you're trying to get involved,
Mm-hmm.
if they feel attached to the material, then they're going to want to be a part of it, because the pay is pretty basic. It's not fancy, A-list type big budget studio movie type pay. We're talking independent film budgets, and so the benefit for them is the experience and the memories, and but they also don't want to commit so much time unless they feel attached to the material, attached to the project, attached to the people.
Right.
And we were able to succeed in getting a terrific crew and an excellent cast.
Mm-hmm. So you casted it. You had the people there. Now you were producing it as well, which meant you were paying for it, right?
Well, the producer, you can say he writes the checks, and he has to source the money. So it wasn't as if I was, paying for it myself, but I did have to raise the money, and I did have to answer to the investors. So there was that part of it. But producing, basically, you're doing all the hiring, and you kind of have, most of the final say on everything. In this case, I did have, pretty much complete control.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now let's go to making the movie now. So you had to formulate your team, right?
Yeah.
And you had to hire certain key positions.
Correct.
So as you did this, because you went to film school, so you learned all that. What'd you look for?
Well, obviously, you look for enthusiasm. You look for interesting ideas when you talk to someone.
Mm-hmm.
Looking for ideas that obviously you didn't come up with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for me. I did a lot of, hey, I want to offload this responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
and because I had certain parts of the story that I had to focus on, such as the directing and some of the producing work. So when I hired, for example, a cinematographer, I wanted him to be able to lead his group without me having to micromanage or interfere.
Mm-hmm.
And because I needed someone to essentially take that responsibility, take the reins, and run with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to find those in the key positions necessary, and then it was pretty much green light, go forward, don't look back. We shot the film in Louisville, which is where I'm from,
Mm-hmm.
and so obviously the cast flew in, and the key positions from LA flew in. And then what we had to do was we kind of filled out the entire team locally.
Right. So the shooting happened in Louisville, and you brought in everybody. Now, how long did shooting take?
Shooting was about, I want to say between 24 to 30 days.
Wow, that was it for 121 pages or 120 pages?
Yeah, you're talking. Well, that was in August, so we probably did some more in September and October.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say maybe 30 days. Sure, 30 days of shooting, and you're talking though 12, 11, 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, of course, took place in a house too. Independent films, they kind of they sort of they're not sort of set all over the country where you're trying to, a lot of the scenes are often in one location. So all those factors taken in, yes, it was about, all in all, sum total, about 31 days of shooting.
Okay, so let's pause the making of the movie and let's go now back to you. So let's go back to 2001 when we met, and now it's roughly what, 2000?
2006.
Okay, so we're 5 years removed from the time that you and I met in Sausalito. Now you're shooting this movie. You're making this movie, and this was a dream of yours. And I know it was a dream because we talked all about it. Walk us through the emotions that you're going through as you are shooting it, and then you're wrapping it. It's finished. Where? Tell us about that.
Well, it was a dream come true. It really was. Talking about it now, reliving it, is so interesting because the reality is that we're talking about almost 15 years ago, but it was something that I had really devoted my life to. I have never wanted anything more than wanting to accomplish this and tell a story that I felt very passionate about, and that it was basically a huge reflection of me and what I thought and what I was experiencing and going through, and my philosophy on life at the time.
Right.
And so to have to go through shooting, to go even through the auditions and have people actually say with so much passion and emotion lines that you have written within a story was surreal. And then actually being back in Louisville where the story is set and being in the locations and having a huge, not a huge, but having a crew shooting actors, talented actors that I'm directing. I mean, it was incredible. It was it was unforgettable. It's one of those things. The really cool thing about film or recording something is that you have it for life. And so, even though it is 15 years later, when I'm 50, I can watch that. When I'm 60, I can watch that. When I'm 70, we can watch that, and we can relive it. And it will somehow stand the test of time. And I think, I'll probably be buried with a DVD of it, I'm sure.
I'm surprised you haven't got a tattoo with it. One thing we haven't told our audience yet what the name of the movie is. I just now thought about that. Tell them.
My True Self.
My True Self. So, okay. So the movie shot, it aired in theaters. It actually launched in Louisville in a theater, right? I mean, they shut down. Tell us about that story.
We had a premiere at the Muhammad Ali Center, which is, a major tourist attraction here. Muhammad Ali is, Louisville's most famous son, and they have a beautiful theater in that museum. And we premiered the movie there, and so that night was a dream come true, actually, too. I mean, that night to show the movie, the finished product, to family and friends who I had invited. Obviously, they had known what I had been doing, and this, as you mentioned, this was 2001 when you were reading it. You met me, so this is sort of years in the making, and years of me talking about it, years of me wanting to do it, years of me hoping that it would happen. And then 2008, we have the premiere, and it's sort of the culmination of all of that. And it was a very, very just beautiful night. The movie is a pretty emotional one. It has a lot of depth and emotion to it, and it was pretty apparent that many people in that, I'd say maybe 150, 200 person audience was emotionally impacted based on the sniffles and the sort of the tears, the emotions that I could hear. So that meant a lot to me. That meant that everything that I felt about the movie was being conveyed to an audience, and they were being emotionally moved.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's, I'm just sitting here reminiscing in my head about that time. What an incredible time for you, because what would you say, how did that experience grow you? Because now where you are, you're in the investing space, you're in the commercial real estate space, you have your own real estate company. How did that experience grow you? I mean, we went from the back patio, Sausalito, eating samosas to a guest house in Culver City, to writing the movie, to many businesses that all three of us have owned, to now you being in your space. How did that experience grow you?
Well, leading a group of people,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to learn a lot, and leading a group of people, you're going to have to ask them to do things, and I found out that there's always a really good way to get someone's attention,
Mm-hmm.
and to get someone to buy in.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times I realized, and this kind of just came out, but I started to realize what I was doing. Let's just say if I needed to have something done a little bit differently than it was,
Mm-hmm.
especially let's say if I was talking to an actor, I always started with, I love what you did here, here, and here with this.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of let them know, give them, I guess you would call that sort of positive reinforcement. And then
Sure.
I feel like by telling them that, at least they were willing to listen. I got their attention because it wasn't as if I was just starting off being completely critical. At least I guess what I'm saying is that I saw some good in what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I expressed that, I verbalized that first. Then when I did that, maybe perhaps that was disarming in a way. Then I felt I had their attention enough to just kind of politely suggest tweaking it a certain way so that I could get the best performance out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I would do that basically to everybody. I took that and did that with everyone, whether I was talking to somebody in the lighting team, whether I was talking to the cinematographer,
Mm-hmm.
whether I was talking to anyone that I needed to have sort of step up their performance. So I think it grew me in a way that I was put in charge of a group of people, and then it was a matter of, okay, how do you address them, and then how do you get the most out of them?
Yeah.
And I didn't expect to learn that as I started. But it happened, and I remember that to this day.
It's a far cry from summer camp teaching tennis, right?
Those are fun days too.
Those were definitely fun days. Well, that was an incredible story, man. I hadn't heard some of that, and I know Josh hadn't either. And we love you, man. That where you have come from to where you grew in Los Angeles to where you are now in Louisville, Kentucky. Getting to see you a couple years ago when we went to the Kentucky Derby was incredible. And it's fascinating to look back and reflect on all the growth that the three of us have had. Your hair still grows. Josh and I's hair doesn't grow anymore on top of our head. And it's been fun though. And I mean, clearly we are friends for life. And we're super, super grateful that you came on the show and shared that story with us. Because I know our people will take from that, because clearly you ended there with the last part of the equation, which was leadership. And man, that was really strong. So we love you, brother. Thanks for being on.
Yeah,
hey,
I love you guys.
Curious, how can people go find you, or how can they go find the movie, or what can they do?
The movie is now on YouTube. I mean, the DVD market is pretty much the movie basically got picked up by a distribution company, and back then it was available on DVDs. I had one thing that was really cool is I had friends in different cities who could order the DVD on Netflix and Blockbuster. And so it was like a movie like any other. So it was living in that space for a while. I think now, obviously, the DVD market has pretty much become a relic. So it's essentially now available on YouTube. I think we figured that was probably as good a place as any. It's not about sort of the monetary receipts that it can gross at this point. It's just a matter of having it easily accessible to anyone who wants to see it. So if you YouTube My True Self, I have not done that in a long, long time, but I assume that it would come up.
Nice. All right. Well, there you have it, everybody. Mr. Rohit Nahata, My True Self. Go to YouTube and check it out. And brother, I love you. No, Josh does
Love
too.
You.
And good stuff, man. Really, really good stuff. Okay, everybody. I am Adam Roach and Josh Licht. We are your hosts of the I Love Recruiting podcast, and you have just listened to Mr. Rohit Nahata. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.